Tonight on Bridge City News, it was one for the ages. A September winter storm shuts down most of Lethbridge. Today was also Orange Shirt Day, as we recognize those in our province who were victims of the 60s scoop. And things got a little out of hand at an event in Hamilton, Ontario, featuring the leader of the People's Party of Canada, Maxime Bernier.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening, thanks so much for joining us. It is being called Snowtember, one of the worst September snowstorms to ever hit Lethbridge. Now, when you look up the term snow day in the dictionary, you may even see a picture of our city today. Lethbridge police were advising motorists not to use the roads since they were quite treacherous. Snow plows and sanding trucks were out today, clearing out the Priority 1 routes, including Highway 3, University Avenue, and Whoop Up Drive. The speed limit on Whoop Up was also lowered to 50 kilometers per hour because of the slippery road conditions. Some cars ended up in the ditch, while others, including big rigs, got stuck in some of the side streets. The city of Lethbridge also had to deal with various power outages, affecting thousands of homes in both the north and south parts of the city. Fortunately, most of the power has now been restored. The University of Lethbridge and Lethbridge College were closed today. There were also bus and flight cancellations. Since the schools were closed, some kids decided to hit the Sugar Bowl for a few toboggan or crazy carpet rides. The city of Lethbridge, meanwhile, has an update for us as to how they've been handling the current winter storm.
We contracted out, so we called all of our local contractors and are very thankful that they all picked up the phone. And we brought in 7 graders to start windrowing all of the priority 1, 2, and 3 roads that you see now are windrowed in and around Lethbridge.
We know that there are trees down on lines that we don't know about yet, and they just haven't created a fault scenario yet, and they will. But having said that, we have 5 crews out right now clearing trees and attending to anything that's been reported through 311.
The 2 incidents that really pop out for me, we had 2 car fires during the snowstorm. People were pushing their cars a little too hard, spinning their tires excessively, and actually caused car fires. We were able to get the car fires out, but we also got a couple of fire trucks stuck. So we were able to get them extricated. We've had a couple of ambulances having some issues getting in and out of residential areas. So again, if you see them out there having some trouble, by all means grab a shovel and give us a hand.
Fortunately, when the weather like this hits, we find it actually paralyzes the city, and actually we haven't been that busy that we know of. Obviously there's crime that we know about and there's crime that we don't know about. So from the standpoint to this point, actually the city's been fairly crippled. So that's actually affected us from not being as busy as we normally would be. Our calls of service are slightly down. We've had some issues within the city with, we had a power outage on Mayor McGrath Drive, I think, that affected some traffic here yesterday, but beyond that, things are running fairly smooth for us from a police standpoint.
The folks with Environment Canada said many areas across southwestern Alberta were hit very hard. Waterton Lakes National Park had close to 100 centimeters of snow. Pincher Creek also had their fair share of the white stuff. As for Lethbridge, did we hit a record for snowfall?
So up until this time, or early this morning, we've had 45 to 55 centimeters total reported to us. Certainly not the snowiest September on record by any means. The day in September with the most snow on record occurred in 1968 on September 21st, and it was with a total snowfall of 51.1 centimeters in a day. This event spanned greater than 1 day, so these amounts are event totals, they're not a day total. In fact, that event, which was in 1968, had quite a lot of snow. I think it was over 100 centimeters of snow fell with that event in 1968, so certainly not the snowiest September on record.
Today was business as usual, according to the Crow's Nest RCMP and Staff Sergeant Gregory Wiebe. Wiebe says not a single city service had been cancelled, and there were no reported collisions causing injury or vehicle damage. Wiebe also shared some tips as to what you should do if you see a transport truck on the road during a storm.
You know what, by and large, the bigger trucks usually don't form a lot of a problem for us. But certainly when you're driving in snowy conditions, driving in close proximity to these large trucks, visibility is next to nothing behind them. And then if you're going to try and get out and pass them in these conditions, you can lose control and whatnot. So best to stay put and give vehicles distance. If a truck in front of you is driving slower, sometimes it's just best to slow your speed with traffic instead of trying to make that pass where you don't have visibility.
Some areas of the Crow's Nest Pass, Pincher Creek and Waterton saw up to 100 centimeters of snow. Police in Pincher Creek have laid charges in connection with an accident on September 27th, which claimed a life. 39-year-old Luke Kessler from Cowley is charged with dangerous driving causing death and failing to stop at the scene of an accident. Kessler's truck collided with a pickup towing a holiday trailer head-on last Friday, killing a 59-year-old woman. He's been remanded in custody and will appear in Pincher Creek Provincial Court tomorrow morning, beginning at 10 a.m. The storm, which hit the Stampede City as well, caused some problems at the Calgary International Airport. On Sunday, dozens of flights were delayed or cancelled, but today the only cancellation was to our city, Lethbridge. It appears as though the extreme weather has now subsided in Alberta's largest city, and staff were able to clear the runways and de-ice the airplanes. Today is a very special time across our province. It is Orange Shirt Day, a time to honor those in our Indigenous community and remember the 12,000 residential school survivors and their families who live in Alberta. Indigenous Minister Rick Wilson released a statement about Orange Shirt Day. We put on orange shirts to honor survivors' experiences and to acknowledge that tragic past. Each one of us bears a responsibility to support safe and inclusive environments for generations of children to come. The 60s scoop is when thousands of Indigenous children were taken from their families and communities for placement in foster homes or adoption. It began in the late 50s and persisted into the 1980s. There's a strong movement afoot to have Alberta separate from Canada. Peter Downing is a former member of the RCMP and Canadian Armed Forces. He is now the leader of Wexit Alberta, not Brexit, but Wexit, and wants to see our province become its own country. Downing says a lot of the frustration stem from the way Ottawa neglects Alberta, and he says the movement is gaining a lot of momentum.
So the movement's moving forward. We're getting our signatures. We're going out. We're meeting people. We're talking to people about the things that are really important to them. Because, again, it's our values that lead the organization. It's not just about leaving Canada or determining, again, we're not picking up our country and physically moving it. We're talking about Albertans governing Alberta for Albertans. And it's led by those three values: economic liberty, social stability, and Alberta sovereignty.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Downing discussing the potential for Alberta separation coming up after business news. 4 people were arrested outside of an event at Mohawk College in Hamilton, Ontario, hosted by PPC leader Maxime Bernier. Bernier said many people simply misunderstood his policies.
Nazi scum off our streets! Nazi scum off our streets!
So for me, that was the first experience, and I must admit that I didn't like it. As it's not Canadians, you know. Actually, these people didn't take time to read our platform, because what they were saying, it is not who we are and who I am as a politician. So that's too bad that they didn't want to have any discussion. We want to have discussion with everybody in this country, and we want to have arguments and a good debate. But we cannot debate when people don't want to look at what you're saying. In reality, they don't.
Campaigning continues across the country as we head to the polls in just 3 weeks' time. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau defending the ongoing deficits in his party's newly released campaign platform, while NDP leader Jagmeet Singh talked about his party's promise to spend $100 million to help kids avoid gang life.
Andrew Scheer is asking Canadians to double down on the kind of conservative leadership that weakens gun control, that does nothing for our environment, and at the same time gives tax breaks to the wealthiest while cutting services for everyone else.
On pharmacare, he's clearly walked away from universal pharmacare. He's walked away from it, and he's told families who are desperate for help that help is not on the way.
Conservative leader Andrew Scheer was in Edmonton talking up his coast-to-coast energy corridor proposal. He says his way will allow pipelines to be pre-approved, avoiding future year-long disputes over routes and land rights.
Since taking office, Justin Trudeau has repeatedly attacked Canada's energy sector and the men and women who work in it. There's Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill. Then the shipping ban, Bill C-48. He continues to turn a blind eye as foreign special interests smear our energy sector, which adheres to the highest environmental standards in the world. The results have been as depressing as they have been predictable. 2 major pipelines canceled, Trans Mountain on life support. Investment has left the country, and hundreds of thousands of hardworking people have lost their jobs. Families across the country are hurting, sometimes desperately so, and Trudeau just won't listen. A new Conservative government will create a national energy corridor to carry Canadian energy and resources from coast to coast.
The RCMP released new details of its investigation into 3 murders in northern BC. Mounties say 19-year-old Cam McLeod and 18-year-old Briar Schmigelski confessed to murdering 3 people before turning the gun on themselves. The murders this summer sparked a nationwide manhunt that ended with their suicides in northern Manitoba.
We uncovered no information that predicted or forecasted that the homicides took place in northern BC. There was no indication that these were planned or predicted. Based on the firearms lab results, crime scene examination, timelines of suspects and suspect recorded admissions, we believe that no other suspects were responsible for the 3 homicides or were involved in any way. The murders appear to be random and crimes of opportunity with no known motive. The investigative theory is that McLeod and Schmigelski came across Lucas Fowler's van and targeted Lucas Fowler and China Dees for unknown reasons. They shot and killed the couple before continuing up through to the Yukon.
Former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton gave a pessimistic outlook on the prospects for getting North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons. Bolton made his first appearance since being ousted from his post by U.S. President Donald Trump.
The DPRK has not made a strategic decision to give up its nuclear weapons. In fact, I think the contrary is true. I think the strategic decision that Kim Jong-un is operating through is that he will do whatever he can to keep a deliverable nuclear weapons capability and to develop and enhance it further. He may try to get relief from international sanctions. He may make some concessions, but under current circumstances, he will never give up the nuclear weapons.
The Toronto Raptors will begin their defense as NBA champions. Now, even with star Kawhi Leonard leaving, the core remains intact, along with several young players who will get more of an opportunity when the regular season tips off on October 22nd.
I think it's a very hungry team. We all understand what Kawhi, meant to the team and how well he played in the playoffs. But we also understand, with how good we can be as a team, and we all going to invest everything in it to be that team. So I'm not worried. I'm just excited about starting training camp and start working on that chemistry. When you spend the summer apart, chemistry kind of separates a little bit. Now you're going to bring it all together again. You're going to do all the little things again, because if not, you're just not going to win, no matter who's on your team.
Good luck going out to the Toronto Raptors. We received over 40 centimeters of the white stuff over the past few days. Fortunately, the winter storm warning has ended from Environment Canada, and the meltdown is on the way. Complete weather details are coming up. The winter storm warning has ended for Lethbridge, thankfully. Tonight, the snow should taper off, and we should see a low near -10. Tomorrow, a high-pressure system returns, bringing lots of sunshine and a high near 6. Let the meltdown begin. More sun and a high of 9 degrees on Wednesday. Even warmer on Thursday with a high expected near 14. Friday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 12. Saturday, sunshine and 14. Sunday, blue sky and 17 degrees. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 18 degrees and an average low of 3. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1992 at 33 degrees, and the record low was -5 in 1985. Sunrise was at 7:29, sunset at 7:14. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up nationally now. Victoria will be mainly sunny and a high of 15. Just a few clouds and 15 as well for Vancouver. Calgary should be mainly sunny and 6. Blue sky, sunshine, and 9 degrees for Edmonton on Tuesday. Expect lots of cloud cover and 5 for both Regina and Saskatoon. Mainly cloudy and 7 degrees for Winnipeg. Now, while we're suffering through the winter storm, it has been a much different story in Ontario. Toronto was warm today. Tomorrow, a chance of showers and a high near 28. Rain and 23 is on tap for Ottawa. Thunder showers and 19 is in the forecast for Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick should receive showers and a high of 13. Overcast and 14 for Halifax, Nova Scotia. A slight chance of rain and 10 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect lots of clouds and a high near 9 degrees for tomorrow. Certain cooked chicken meat is being recalled due to possible Listeria contamination. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the chicken was sold across the country by Tip Top Poultry, Reuven International, Cisco, and Allen Plus Inc. The package sizes were 4, 4.54, and 13.64 kilogram sizes. All have the same pack date of July 29, 2019. Anyone who has the chicken is advised to either throw it out or return it to the point of purchase. So far, there have been no illnesses linked to the product. Forever 21 is closing down all 44 of its Canadian stores while restructuring its global business under bankruptcy protection. The low-priced teen fashion chain announced that it has filed for the protection. It also plans to close 178 of its 500 locations in the United States. The LA-based company says it plans to withdraw from the Canadian market by the end of the year. Company officials say they will focus maximizing the value of its stores in the States and that Canadian consumers can make purchases online. Alta Gas is selling off its stake in a 200-kilometer pipeline in Pennsylvania that went into service last year. The deal with Meade Pipeline Investment is said to be worth $870 million. The pipeline moves natural gas from the northeastern Marcellus region to markets in the mid-Atlantic and southeastern areas of the United States. The Calgary-based Alta Gas says it has now announced or completed about $2.2 billion in asset sales. The goal for the company this year was $1.5 to $2 billion. There's a way of converting garbage into energy. Now that's according to Paul Ryan, who is vice chair and project lead with the Southern Alberta Energy from Waste Association. Ryan says when you do the conversion, there are also valuable byproducts.
This is an electrical generation facility that instead of using natural gas or coal as a fuel to produce electricity, this uses garbage. And you can produce a tremendous amount of steam also that can be used for many different applications, for recycling, for meat processing, for vegetable processing, because everything we do when it comes to our food supply requires hot water. And, you know, it's incredibly efficient to take surplus steam, a value-added product from an energy from waste facility, and then use that for processing other products.
Watch the full interview with Paul Ryan and Paul Arthur converting garbage into fuel. That's coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 35 points on the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up almost 97 points. The Nasdaq was up close to 60 to 79.99, and the S&P 500 was up almost 15 points to 29.76. Oil was down $1.63 to $54.28 per barrel. Natural gas was down 8 cents to $2.33. Gold was down $24.23 to $14.72 per ounce. And silver was down today 53 cents to $17.01 per ounce. Wheat is at $205 per metric ton. Barley's at $200. Canola came in at $453 per metric ton, and corn was $284. Live cattle was down 45 cents to $105.20. Feeder cattle was down $1.93 to $144.63, and lean hogs were up 18 cents to $65.83. The Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to $75.50 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, they were calling it Snowtember. A winter storm brought over 40 centimeters of snow to Lethbridge over the past few days. The winter-like conditions shut down schools, bus routes, forced flight cancellations, even caused some power outages. The city says many of the Priority 1 routes have been plowed, but driving is still not recommended because of the slippery road conditions. Fortunately, the winter storm warning has ended. Sunshine and warmer temperatures are on the way beginning tomorrow. Did you know you can convert garbage into energy? Up next, BCN's Paul Arthur chats with another Paul, Paul Ryan, with the Southern Alberta Energy from Waste Association. The two Pauls will have details on how one man's trash is another man's treasure. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here is your Bridge City News Community Calendar. Award-winning author Daniel Handler, otherwise known as Lemony Snicket, will be the special guest speaker for the Lethbridge Public Library's Author Talk, book signing and Q&A session on Wednesday, October 2nd at 7 p.m. at the Yates Memorial Theatre. Admission is free, but tickets are required. Pick up yours today at the library's main branch customer service desk. For more information, visit lethlib.ca. Come out and support a worthy cause. The Blue Rain Ranch Animal Assisted Therapy Foundation Benefit Dinner and Auction is taking place on Saturday, October 19th at the Community Hall in Fort Macleod, with cocktails being served at 5:30 p.m. and dinner beginning at 6. Come dressed in your best Western wear and enjoy live music by Duo Grand Fiddle and Guitar. All proceeds to support access for low-income trauma and abuse victims to counseling and animal-assisted therapy. For tickets, call 403-894-9160, and for event details, visit bridgesofhope.com. The Galt Museum and Archives is hosting a Halloween Spooktacular on Saturday, October 26 from 1 to 4 p.m. Come for a family-friendly afternoon where you can play games, decorate a pumpkin, make a trick-or-treat bag, and other fun crafts. Plus, go on a tour of the building, hear spooky ghost stories, and enjoy free popcorn and caramel apple slices. Admission is free. For details, visit galtmuseum.com. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Most Canadians believe in doing their part to recycle. But do we actually know what happens in that recycling process? And are there better ways to go about it? Joining me today is Paul Ryan. He is the Vice Chair and Project Lead for the Southern Alberta Energy from Waste Association, or SAWA, which is developing a project designed to turn non-recyclable garbage waste into electricity. Sounds great. Paul, thank you so much for joining us here today at Bridge City News.
Well, Paul, thank you for having me on.
You bet. Looking forward to the conversation here. I want you to, first of all, tell us a little bit about SAWA, because this has roots right here in Southern Alberta. It's not just Lethbridge, but beyond this, all kinds of small communities in Southern Alberta, right?
Well, if you look at wanting to reduce our carbon footprint in Alberta, or actually even in Canada, it doesn't get any better than a homegrown, born in Alberta solution, because this really is grassroots. This is like a great group of people that got together, small urbans, large rurals, all working together voluntarily to try to find a solution. And I got to tell you, it's a pleasure, a thrill to actually be a part of this.
That's awesome. So now this started in, was it Vulcan? Is that correct?
Well, I'm a little fuzzy on that particular part, because that happened before I got asked to get involved. Mm-hmm. But yes, for the most part, my understanding is that it started in the Vulcan region with the Vulcan Regional Waste Commission, the town of Vulcan. The city of Lethbridge was part of that, and the town of Coaldale, and I believe possibly Willow Creek. But I mean, this really is a bunch of the local boys getting together and said, you know something, we got to stop throwing garbage into the ground and having it go into our water wells and into our groundwater. There's got to be a better way. So what is the better way?
So you are developing, as I understand it, a project that's designed to turn, again, non-recyclable garbage and waste into electricity. So could you explain how that actually works? And I understand there's a bit of a Swedish model that this has been based on as well, right?
I really can't identify any particular technology, because when we get to the procurement stage, of course, that would be inappropriate for me to do. But if you look at this, what this is that this is an electrical generation facility. Mm-hmm. That instead of using natural gas or coal as a fuel to produce electricity, this uses garbage. And you can produce a tremendous amount of steam also that can be used for many different applications, for recycling, for meat processing, for vegetable processing, because everything we do when it comes to our food supply requires hot water. And, it's incredibly efficient to take surplus steam, a value-added product from an energy from waste facility, and then use that for processing other products. So very much like what they did with the facility in Burnaby. They used to ship their steam to a cardboard recycling facility where they used that to create the hot water they needed for processing. So there's lots of really good value-added parts of this, but, simplistically, it's burning waste instead of gas or coal to make electricity.
Right, and again, you're burning the non-recyclable waste there. Now, I understand as part of this process here, as you're analyzing things and figuring things out, you actually hired some people to analyze what's inside the dumpsters out there, right? So what did you find?
Hired some people. I think we've had something like 24 engineers now working on this project, the different parts of it. And the one you're talking about is probably one of my favorite ones. When it comes to describing what we did. So if you're going to manage waste and if you want to create electricity out of it, you've got to know what's in that waste stream. What is that caloric value? So how much of it is wood? How much of it is plastic? How much of it is cardboard? How much of it is paper? How much of it is lettuce and tomatoes and metals and all those different things? So basically it's called a waste stream characterization, where you go out and you categorize the waste. And from that, our engineers are able to estimate what the caloric value of that waste is. In other words, how much energy is in it. Depending on who you talk to, who you read, 1 ton of municipal solid waste is the equivalent of 3/4 of a barrel of oil. But you got to know what's in it. And so it's basically a whole bunch of engineers in white Tyvek suits doing dumpster diving. And yes, and a lot of people laugh when you say that because they picture something. But really that's what it is. And the waste is just taken out, literally taking the bags apart and separating out the waste into the different types of things that are in that waste stream, and then weighing it and then coming up with an estimate of what does the average person produce when it comes to household waste. And when they produce that household waste, what's the caloric value of that? How much of that can be used for something else? And how much of it actually can we get into the recycling stream? Because, if you look at SAWA's mission statement, very clearly we say that we are not interested in using things that can be recycled as part of the feedstock for an energy from waste facility. We've got friends in the big cities, and Lethbridge is certainly one of them, where they work very, very hard to get as much stuff out of the landfill as they can. And a lot of times you spend a lot of money, and you probably saw the City of Calgary announcement that there are now $300,000 to store plastic that can't get recycled, and another $130,000, I think it is, to throw it in the landfill. Well, that's the kind of stuff that if I was king for a day, I would say, well, can you hang on to that for me till I build my energy from waste facility? Because instead of throwing it in the landfill, why don't you send it over here and let us use it to generate some electricity and make some hot water, get some value out of it, and not burn it in the landfill. So we went out and characterized the waste stream. Certainly we now know what's in it. We did it in a number of different places for our members, not just down in the county of Lethbridge, but we did it all over. And what we found is that it's relatively consistent with the national average. It changes during the season, summertime, wintertime are different. But certainly it did give our engineers the information they need to then be able to look at our cost predictions. In other words, if you've got that much caloric value in your waste, you can generate this much electricity with it. And then when you generate that much electricity, we can sell that and help offset the costs of running the operation.
So this production facility, once it's up and running, will it feed the grid as well?
Well, certainly, Paul, there's actually two approaches to that I've been made aware of. And so one is, yes, you can feed the grid. And so in order to do that, you need to be by a major power transmission line, which is one of the criterias on the nice to haves with where we would like to put it. But the other one has this colloquial term, it's called inside the fence. And what that means is that you have an energy from waste facility that generates a lot of electricity, generates a lot of steam. Do you need to sell it to the grid, or can you sell it locally to industries that build up around energy from waste facilities? Because they make incredibly good anchor points for heavy industrial parks or mid-industrial parks like recycling, manufacturing, paper, anything that needs electricity and heat next to those things can really benefit from it, because you don't have to build new transmission lines and new transmission wires and the carbon footprint that's all associated with that, and then fight with everybody to build it on their land to get it to your industrial park. If you can actually use that as district energy or inside the fence energy, there's an incredible monetary savings in having to supply that energy. But the other one is that it's cheap for them to buy it from you. So you think of all the greenhouses we have down in Redcliffe, down by Medicine Hat.
Right, yeah.
What are they doing there? Well, they're there because they got cheap energy. So, when you go buy them little tiny 6 cucumbers in the package at the supermarket that you go to, that's where they come from. And so what SAWA did was, instead of taking that approach, we asked the question, what is the best way to treat waste other than landfilling? And man, we came across a tremendous amount of technologies, varying degrees of environmental benefit, considerable differences in operating costs. And one of the rules that we gave to our engineers is that whatever technology we pick, it's got to be able to address the whole waste stream, not just a little part of it. Because unless you address the whole waste stream, you're still landfilling. And so let's look at what we can do. And the other rule that we gave them is that it has to be demonstrated technology, commercially demonstrated. So not this stuff that the boys came up with in the garage on the workbench, and
Right.
you know, not this stuff that
Yeah.
people say should be on the Star Trek Enterprise. It's stuff that we can actually go and stand by and touch and feel and look at, and look at their emissions tests, the stuff, the regulatory responses that they had to their requirements and their operating permits, to do stack tests and do the emissions,
Well,
so you can actually
well, let me
see
ask
it.
about that. Yeah, you mentioned, I mean, again, you're burning, non-recyclables here, right, to produce steam and electricity. So what are the emissions like? Is that going to cause, a big carbon footprint, or is the technology such that it really is, nothing that makes a huge difference that way? It's going to be fairly non-impacting.
So now we're back to Inga from Sweden. So the technology in Europe, is incredibly well understood. And, they don't screw around over there because such a dense population and people are so close to these facilities that their emissions management is state of the art and continues to improve. Every month there's another improvement. And depending what engineering report you read or which white paper you read, you can generate electricity with waste with about the same emissions as burning natural gas to create energy. And so the rule that we gave to our engineers is we want to see the best technology out there. Yeah, it's very expensive, but it is the right thing to do. And so we looked at that as being a must-have, because if we can't do this right, we don't want to do it at all. And then you look at, compare your emissions from an energy and waste facility to the emissions from a landfill. So now you have a landfill. Whenever I drive down the Lethbridge, I drive down over the big hill and I look to my left and you can see parts of it sticking out there. And landfills, when you put stuff in landfills, it continues to sit there and cook. It's kind of like a low pressure cooker, if you will, because everything gets mixed together. And they off-gas. So they off-gas methane. And depending on what day of the week it is and which science it is that's talking about it, it's 20 to 30 times worse than CO2. But certainly that's what they do. And you have to manage that. So you've got to collect that. And the way they normally do is they collect that and they just burn it. They don't use it to light light bulbs. In some places they light a couple of light bulbs with it. But they convert it to CO2 away from methane because that's better for the environment. And also there's the leachate liabilities that you have with landfills. And we've got some municipalities up north that have had some interesting engagements with Alberta Environment. And we know that we have some landfills that have excavation orders because the landfill liners are leaking into the groundwater. So it's not just what we're putting into the air, Paul. It's also what are we putting into the water?
Yeah, so when you look at the big picture, you're kind of like, say, leaking down, which isn't good, right, as with our groundwater and so forth. And then, the methane that's being given off here, and you compare that to the emissions coming from a stack that's producing electricity and steam here, it's a much better turnout here when you look at that compared to the landfills, right?
I think so, yes. And in terms of emissions, people always say to me, and this is one of the reasons I was asked to get involved with the Saywell project in the first place. I understand stack emissions from what we call regulated emitters. So anything that's got a smokestack is a regulated emitter. And so they have to go through approval processes and things. And then they have mandatory reporting.
Hey, let me shift gears for a second here. I had mentioned at the top there a little bit about the recycling, and maybe we don't know what that process actually looks like. But where does recycling end up once you see the truck picks it up? Bye, it's gone, right? We have no idea where it goes after that, most of us, I think. So, I hear some stories that, some of it gets dumped in a landfill and doesn't actually get recycled. And especially now that, of course, China is not taking our garbage like they used to. That's probably true, isn't it?
Well, I get to speak to a lot of municipal councils, as you could imagine. We've got something like 50 hamlets, towns, and villages and rural municipalities involved in this, and they all got their own councils. So I think some days I should get a top hat and a cane because of the roadshow that you have to constantly educate new councils and new politicians. And I asked them directly, I said, so where does your garbage go? And you got to see the look on their face because they go, well, we put it in the bin. I said, okay. And then where does it go from there? Well, they pick it up. I said, okay. And from there, where does it go? Well, it's politicians for the most part don't care about garbage until it's piling up and stinking in front of their neighbor's house. And so most people don't know where it goes. It just goes, it goes away. So, and you're recycling, and where does your recycling go? Well, I put it in the blue bin. All right. And where does it go from there? Well, they pick it up, and and then the municipality takes it, and so then you go to the municipality and say, all right, so what are you guys doing with this? They say, well, we have a qualified contractor that takes it, and they've got a market for it. And so now try to make the circle smaller, and good luck with that one. And for that to be occurring, you've got to believe, and you need to be a true believer in this one, you got to believe that when China shut the door with the golden sword last year, 80% of the world's recyclables were going to China. And they stopped. They slammed the door shut. So now you've got to believe that someone managed to take up 80% of the world's capacity of recyclables within 1 year.
That's
now,
not happening.
Who is that genius?
Hey, can you give us a brief, how long will this take to get going? Are you guys close to have this up and running at all? I mean, I know there's approval, and you've got to find a proper location, and it's a whole process, right?
It is, Paul, and every morning when I'm shaving and looking in the mirror, I look at myself and I say, why does this take so long? And it is a long process, concept to completion, the one in the Durham, York region. It was 10 years from concept to completion. We're a little bit more than halfway through. We had a change in government a little while ago, so that certainly affected our timeline. But right now we're in the middle of shortlisting. So we had 6 municipalities that say, hey, listen, we want to have this thing because it's an economic engine. I mean, you're in Lethbridge, look around at your industrial parks and look what that does in your economy. And they're saying we want these. These are economic drivers. So we're evaluating those right now. We're getting pretty close to the short list. And then once we do that, then we are ready to go out to the technology vendor marketplace and the finance marketplace and say, okay, we got a place to put it. We've got all these municipalities. We got this much waste. And now what are we doing next? And so we're poised to do that. But in order to shortlist some of these sites, we got to go dig holes in fields. Well, there's crops out in fields right now. And I don't have to tell you in Lethbridge, how would you feel about me running my tracked hoe out in your cornfield and digging a hole? So we're waiting until harvest is, until the crops are off. And then we're going to do that. And we hope to go to our membership in October with a recommendation to see what they say. Because while I might be the project lead and I'm the one that you talk to, all of the decisions are made by our members because this is a big play, it's a big deal.
Thanks for sharing all of that with us here today. We needed to hear that. Paul, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul, for having me on.
The Alberta separatist movement seems to be growing to some degree, with many Albertans tired of not having their voices heard in Ottawa. Joining me now via Skype is Peter Downing, a former member of the RCMP and the Canadian Armed Forces. He's now the leader of Wexit Alberta. Not Brexit, but Wexit, a group that wants to separate from Canada and form its own country. And by the way, he's pulled over right now. That's why he's not wearing his safety belt. Peter, welcome to BCN.
Thank you for having me today, Hal.
Now, Peter, a recent online survey conducted by Research Co. shows around 30% of Albertans believe the province would be better off as its own country. Why are some Albertans wanting out?
Well, a number of reasons. If you look at the oil downturn, the price of oil, obviously that's our bread and butter of our economy in Alberta. We lost over 100,000 jobs in that time, and we've been kicked on every side, whether it be through pipeline moratoriums with Bill C-69, tanker bans with Bill C-48, a completely unfair equalization program that we send over taxation equalization. We send over $40 billion a year to Ottawa. We've put in $622 billion since the beginning of the equalization program. And all we're being told is that our oil is dirty, that we're being, ungrateful little children, that type of thing. In Alberta, we have 34 seats within the House of Commons. To contrast that with Ontario, there are 121. To contrast that with Quebec, there are 78. Just in the city of Toronto alone, there are 25 seats. And in the city of Montreal alone, there are 10. So those two cities whose their political and their economic interests are fundamentally opposed to ours in Alberta outvote us 35 to 34. Right now, our federal vote does not count.
So, Peter, do you believe a big reason why you went out of Confederation, and a lot of others too, is because economically and politically it really favors Eastern Canada?
Yes, it does. Obviously, just the numbers again there is that combined with Ontario and Quebec is 199 seats. Alberta has 34. And when you're looking at aging populations in Eastern Canada, Alberta has the youngest demographic. Right now, you have the largest portion of folks who are leaving the workforce right now. They're at the highest paying part of their taxes, and they're going to be not paying taxes anymore and drawing down on social services. So it's an upside down pyramid. If you look at the green and the quote unquote green initiatives that I listened to Elizabeth May just last Saturday on the radio, and she said very clearly that the carbon tax has to go up year over year over year. The interviewer asked, when will it stop? Well, it will never stop. And the reason is because it guarantees a dividend for Canadians, which is called guaranteed basic income. We've heard that term before, basically getting something for nothing. And the second part of it is retrofitting aging buildings in Eastern Canada. Think about the Galen Weston's Loblaws Corporation, very friendly Liberal donors, received $12 million in taxpayer funding for high efficiency refrigerators that they could easily afford. So this divide between socialism and crony capitalism, again, we have no say. Our federal vote doesn't count. And there's also, it's not just the economics and the politics. There's also a cultural distinction. It's a little bit different than the Quebec referendum of the 1990s, which was based on nationality and language. But here, I think it's part of the undertone is the values and the values that we have in Western Canada. We are hardworking, decent people who don't want to take what we haven't earned from our neighbors, from our friends. If I want something for my family, I don't want to take it from my next door neighbor. I want to be able to, family is the number one social service, and it doesn't cost the taxpayer a cent.
Do you believe strongly if Alberta kept back those transfer payments that it could be self-sufficient, self-sustaining?
Absolutely. You could look at Jack Mintz, noted economist from the University of Calgary, said that Alberta has more economic reasons and there's more benefit to leaving what we call the Canadian Confederation than the United Kingdom has from leaving the European Union.
Now, you've held some meetings to gather support here. Former Harper government cabinet minister Jay Hill attended one of the meetings. Is he supporting your movement, and are other current or former politicians jumping on board?
Well, I can't speak. I'll allow Jay to speak for himself. I'll echo the sentiment that he said, is obviously not to take the separatist movement lightly. And from speaking from conservative grassroots, blue collar and conservatives, educated professionals from all walks across industry, whether it be energy, agriculture, healthcare, law, finance, they're saying the same thing, is that, I'm a proud Canadian. They're saying they're proud Canadians right now, and they remain so. But if Justin Trudeau gets elected on October 21st, they'll be supporting the Wexit movement and separatism on October 22nd. We will not live through another 4 years of Justin Trudeau. We're not tolerating that, and we are going to explore every option available for us right now. The province of Albertans have given Jason Kenney and the UCP a very strong, a very clear mandate to be able to fix Confederation, to get pipelines, to stop the economic abuse. But if he's not able to deliver what they want, they're going to be voting Wexit next time around.
So, Peter, let's chit-chat a bit about your political platform. How would you administer taxes?
Well, there are three key components we are Indigenous and non-Indigenous Albertans who've come together voluntarily for three main principles. The first is economic liberty. So if you take a look at whether it be taxation or regulation, it can be dealt with in the same vein, is really what is required to deliver essential public services: police, fire, ambulance, military, revenue services, education, healthcare, roadway construction. What it wouldn't be for, one of the problems you're dealing with down in Lethbridge, is your supervised injection clinic. We firmly, and I've worked in Christian missions and homeless shelters, and I can tell you firmly, the people who want to get clean can't get clean because they're tempted all over the place by the easy access to drugs, to needles, that sort of thing. We want to take the $40 billion, the $41 billion we're sending here to Ottawa, to be able to invest in infrastructure to help our friends and neighbors who are addicted to narcotics, to opiates, to be able to get clean, to be able to get the psychological, the emotional support they need, jobs, trainings, anything like that to help them be marketable and to be successful after they leave treatment. And that's usually when people tend to fall off the rails, is after they leave the treatment program. So we want to be able to invest in those programs which actually solve a problem and then give us increased returns in terms of saving money on hospital visits and ambulance trips, police investigations, son death, all these things that I've investigated as a police officer and know the back end costs, the court visits, the lawyers, all that stuff that's a major drain on the system. And we're looking at taking care of the problem upstream. We can only do that when we're not sending our tax money to Ottawa to be spent overseas or any kind of new social justice plan or whatever you typically see on the political left. Is we're using economic liberty and fiscal conservatism to actually solve social problems and to leave, if the government can't do more for you than you can do with your own dollar, we have a moral obligation to leave that dollar alone or to give it back to you.
Would you look at merging Alberta's various separatist groups into one group and run candidates in any upcoming federal and provincial by-elections? What kind of response have you received so far?
So we've reached out. Actually, there have been a number of folks from the other groups, the other separatist groups or smaller conservative groups that have reached out to us. And it's a work in progress. There's personality conflicts. I mean, talk about why there's so many churches and there's divisions between those churches is sometimes everybody believes the same thing, but sometimes personality conflicts come into play. And it really just takes time and patience. And to be able to be willing to see that through. Yes, we are going to be running a full slate of candidates in the next provincial election or by-elections that are bound to come up over the next 4 years. And federally, one of the next steps or the next level of the movement is to be able to have federal representation. That's not our main concern, but again, like the Bloc, the Parti Québécois currently has the Bloc Québécois. We're looking at the same options so that our voices aren't just heard across Western Canada, but all across Canada and especially into Central and Eastern Canada.
Now, in order to become registered as a political party in Alberta, you need to either run 44 candidates in a general election or collect around 7,800 signatures on a petition form. Are you getting anywhere with either one of those?
Both. We're in the process right now of identifying, recruiting, soft penciling MLA candidates in, again, across all 87 ridings. We're in the process right now. We've already, at each of our events, we're collecting signatures. We have, you may be aware, we have a very large event going this coming Saturday in Lloydminster. And it's a get-together between Wexit, Alberta and Wexit, Saskatchewan, which is a sister separatist movement in Saskatchewan. And we've oversold and we had to get a bigger room. We've actually doubled our the folks who've signed up to join us. So it's basically the two events that we had in Red Deer and Calgary the other weekend. We've got more than that coming up just in Lloydminster alone. So the movement's moving forward. We're getting our signatures. We're going out. We're meeting people. We're talking to people about the things that are really important to them. Because again, it's our values that lead the organization. It's not just about leaving Canada or determining, again, we're not picking up our country and physically moving it. We're talking about Albertans governing Alberta for Albertans. And it's led by those three values: economic liberty, social stability, and Alberta sovereignty.
Now, how would that actually work, though, when it comes to the armed forces, federal judiciary, a healthcare system, a pension plan? There's a lot of work that goes into forming your own country.
There is, but it also offers a lot more stability for the folks here in Alberta. If you look at the national defense budget of roughly about $20 billion a year, again, we're sending $40 billion, $41 billion to Ottawa each year. Not to mention being able to unlock our natural resources, being able to get the revenue that we should be with crude oil demand increasing 1.5% each year. There is a demand on the world market for Alberta oil. We are able to fund it. We're able to stand up an effective military service. If you look at pension right now, major liability, when the government's talking about guaranteed basic income, where do you think all that's going to come from? When they want to sell $25,000 a year that to everybody across the country who hasn't earned it, where do you think that money is going to come from? It's going to deplete the Canadian pension plans that currently stands. We're talking about, again, with upside down demographics in the rest of the country, with Alberta having the youngest demographics, a locally administered Alberta pension plan would not only be better funded and not making risky investments into places like Mumbai, India housing corporations, or possibly being pilfered for guaranteed basic income projects. But we also have the portability. Right now, if a couple, God forbid, they're to die in a car crash, that money doesn't transfer to their survivors or to their children. The government keeps it as it stands right now. So we're looking at, again, doing what's right for people so that they can have their own money.
I remember when Quebec was talking about separation, of course, the referendum and so forth, a lot of people were saying, well, as long as you take your portion of the debt. So is that going to be an issue for Alberta too, if it separates, becomes its own country?
Albertans have put $622 billion into the equalization program since the 1950s when it first started. We've paid our bill. And if Canada has their queen who owns 1/6 of planet Earth, she can take care of the rest.
What about Alberta being a landlocked country, province? Now, how would you actually get your products exported and imported?
The irony when it comes to the quote-unquote landlocked status is that as a coastal nation or a country with access to the coast, Canada has the ability to restrict, again, even though it's unconstitutional, they have the ability to restrict exports to. They're currently locking our oil in the ground. As a landlocked nation, Alberta would actually have access to the coast because Canada has been a signatory to the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas, Article 10, since the 1970s, which allows landlocked countries like Switzerland and Europe to be able to get their products and resources out to coasts for trade. And Canada would have to abide by international law. So we would actually have more sovereignty over our resources as being independent and more access to the coast as being an independent nation. The other side of it, too, is it works both ways. British Columbia is going to want to be able to have their ground and air commerce through Alberta ground and airspace to the rest of Canada. The rest of Canada is going to want to be able to transport through Alberta ground and airspace to get their manufactured goods out for coastal shipping. So it really does work both ways. Alberta is actually, when we recognize the full extent of our geopolitical leverage, we're in a fantastic position.
So if Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberals get re-elected this fall, to what degree would the separatist movement really gain support?
It would explode overnight.
So a lot of people reaching out to you saying, how about not just Alberta, but why not team up with Saskatchewan and Manitoba and create a country with the 3 prairie provinces?
Well, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, and in common vernacular and in 21st century, people have experienced bad relationships and they get out of bad relationships. And sometimes they need a sense of identity on their own before they say, okay, who am I going to team up with next type thing. So I think there's a little bit of that psychological piece for Albertans to get a sense of who we are a little bit more. At the same time, we look at like-minded provinces and economies, resource-based economies like Saskatchewan. And as I mentioned earlier on, there is a Wexit Saskatchewan movement that we have a joint meeting in Lloydminster on the border city this coming Saturday. And we look at the potential in a province like Manitoba. Typically have voted Liberal and they have major government centres, the Canada Revenue Agency is based out of Winnipeg. But if you look at the underdeveloped northern part of that province, who they have some real social problems that stem from poverty through a logistics infrastructure to be built up towards the Churchill port for exports to Europe. It would just bring so much wealth to that area and it would just be good for everybody for so many reasons. So we're looking at in the future, and obviously each province needs to develop their own political response individually, but we definitely look for opportunities. Again, it's Albertans will decide that, and at the same time, we're building the Wexit, we're already building those relationships so that we have good relationships with the other provinces, whether it's as a joint confederation or whether it's separately.
Peter Downing, the founder of Wexit Alberta, thanks a lot for your time today from Edmonton.
Thank you, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.